On a Tuesday evening in late October, the rain had been relentless throughout the day. My son, Ryan, who is 20, had invited his closest friend over following their evening class. I had no objections. My acquaintance with Ethan dated back to his high school days. He had devoted endless hours to our home throughout the years, savoring my meals, cheering for teams in the living room, and even lending a hand with the groceries. Yet recently it felt distinct. Not with him, at least that's what I convinced myself, but with me. For years, the fabric of my marriage had been fraying, and 3 months ago, my husband and I took the step to part ways. Ryan endeavored to infuse the house with vibrancy, striving to stave off the sense of emptiness that lingered within its walls. That evening, the boys burst through the door, soaked from the downpour, their laughter ringing out as if they were untouched by any worries. They discarded their shoes at the entrance, tossed their jackets into a damp pile, and I chided them with little conviction before presenting the meal. Ethan's smile radiated warmth, effortlessly inviting. "I appreciate it, Mrs. Taylor. You consistently create the most delicious meals," he remarked. For a fleeting moment, it felt reminiscent of the past, before my nights transformed into endless spans of quietude. Following dinner, they ascended the stairs to engage in some video game fun. I lingered in the kitchen, tidying up, the echoes of their laughter drifting softly through the floorboards. It ought to have brought me joy. Yet amid the symphony of clinking dishes and the gentle patter of rain, the burden in my chest became impossible to overlook. I rested against the counter, my gaze lost in the void, my eyes ignited with a fierce heat, and in an instant tears cascaded, distorting my sight. They approached softly at first, then with increasing intensity, until I found myself clutching the edge of the counter to maintain my balance. I was unaware of his descent. "Madam, is that you, Taylor?" His voice carried a gentle hesitance. Startled, I spun around and swiftly wiped my face. "Oh, Ethan." He lingered in the doorway, his hands buried deep in the pocket of his hoodie. "Ryan drifted off to sleep upstairs. I merely stopped by to fetch some water." "Certainly," I replied, moving aside, wishing he would simply take the glass and go before he became aware of anything amiss. Yet he remained still, not approaching the sink. He lingered in that spot, his gaze fixed on me. "You've been crying." I summoned a smile. "It's insignificant. It has simply been a rather lengthy day." His gaze became gentle. "It's something." A peculiar tension hung in the atmosphere between us at that moment. This was not the Ethan who once shared our table, diligently working on homework alongside Ryan. He was a young man, still far too young for my taste, gazing at me as if he truly perceived my presence. Not as a mother, not as a neighbor, but as a solitary woman in her kitchen on a rainy night. In some inexplicable way, that posed a greater threat than any words he might have uttered. I ought to have brought it to a close at that moment. I ought to have insisted he return upstairs, allowing me the solitude I craved in that moment. Yet I found myself uttering, "It's been a challenging few months." He moved in gradually, as if drawing near to a timid creature. "Would you like to discuss it?" I turned my head, tears once more on the verge of spilling. "Not quite." And then, before I could intervene, his hand found its way to my shoulder, warm, unwavering. "There's no obligation," he whispered. "However, you need not face it in solitude." It was the inaugural moment I allowed him to be that near. I chose not to push him away. The rain fell steadily outside, a gentle cascade that muted every sound and transformed the house into a secluded sanctuary. I imagined Ethan would pick up his glass of water and retreat upstairs. Instead, he propped himself against the counter opposite me, as if he had no plans of departing anytime soon. I attempted to brush it aside with a chuckle. "I can manage on my own, Ethan. I am well." He inclined his head. "You're not okay. Yet that's perfectly fine." The manner in which he expressed it, devoid of pity, devoid of judgment, caused a tightening in my chest. In recent months, countless individuals have extended their sympathy to me, yet few have truly grasped my experience. He wasn't suggesting that I find a reason to smile. He allowed me to exist just as I was. "Does it concern Ryan's father?" he inquired softly. The utterance of my husband's name resonated like a delicate crack in the atmosphere. "It's complicated," I murmured, drawing my arms around myself in a protective embrace. We are apart. He nodded slowly, as if he had anticipated it all along. I apologize. I merely shrugged, refrained from doing so. There are moments when certain things simply cease to function, even if you attempt to mend them. He fell silent for a brief moment. His gaze lingered, not in a manner that unsettled me, but in a way that made me feel seen, as though he were meticulously documenting all the details that others overlooked. I cast a fleeting look at the staircase. It would be wise to rest for a while. The hour is late. I'm not tired, he declared. You really shouldn't be by yourself at this moment. The words constricted my throat once more. Ethan, I'm not trying to make it awkward, he said hastily, raising his hands. I've been acquainted with you for years. You have consistently taken on the role of ensuring the well-being of those around you. Who takes care of that for you? It was a question so straightforward, yet it settled heavily within me, like a stone in my stomach. The reality was there was no one. That is no longer the case. We lingered in quietude for a brief moment, the sole sounds being the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic patter of rain against the window. Without a second thought, I drew out a chair at the kitchen table. Take a seat, I instructed. He offered a slight smile and complied with the instructions given to him. We faced one another, our cups of coffee gradually losing their warmth in the space that separated us. Gradually I began to speak. It's not about the entirety, just fragments here and there. The stillness of the house enveloped the night. I began to keep the television on, seeking the comfort of some ambient sound. It struck me how long it had been since I experienced a hug that didn't carry the weight of obligation. He remained silent. He refrained from resorting to clichés. He simply absorbed my words, his gaze unwavering as it locked onto mine. In that moment I noticed how we were inching closer over the table. Our voices hushed, as if the kitchen had transformed into an intimate realm of our own. Then his hand extended over the table, fingertips lightly grazing against mine. A mere whisper of contact, hardly anything at all. Yet it ignited a wave of warmth that coursed through my arm. I remained steadfast, refusing to retreat. In that moment I understood the peril that lay before me, not due to the events that had transpired, but rather due to the void of what was yet to occur. For when you begin to allow another to occupy the voids you've long been yearning to fill, the desire only intensifies. Above, Ryan stirred in his slumber. The noise snapped me back to the present moment. I withdrew my hand, rising swiftly to my feet. It would be wise for us to take a moment to rest, I suggested. Ethan remained silent. As he walked past me toward the stairs, he halted briefly to whisper, "You're not as invisible as you believe." And then he vanished, leaving me alone in the kitchen, my heart racing wildly. The aroma of coffee roused me from slumber even before the dawn's light crept in. For a fleeting instant, I lost sight of the fact that Ethan had spent the night, and the final memory that lingered was of us in the kitchen, our hands nearly brushing against one another. I slipped into my robe and made my way down the stairs. The rain had ceased, yet the house lingered with a lingering dampness, wrapped in the cool embrace of early morning. Ethan stood at the counter, his bare feet touching the cool floor, as he poured coffee into 2 waiting mugs. His hair remained tousled from slumber, and there was an effortlessly charming quality to his presence, an impression that he was meant to be there. "Morning," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, maintaining an even tone. "You've risen with the dawn." "I couldn't sleep," he remarked, pushing one of the mugs in my direction. "Thought I'd brew us some coffee." I savored a sip, appreciating the comforting warmth that enveloped my hands. "Thank you. Is Ryan still not here?" He offered a subtle smile. "As solid as stone." I made sure to verify before descending. That moment, his concern for my son, should have anchored me, brought to mind his role within these walls. Yet it only intensified the perilous distance that lay between us. We glided through the kitchen in a gentle, hushed cadence, reminiscent of 2 souls who had shared this dance for countless years. As he extended his arm to seize the sugar, it lightly grazed against mine. The sensation seemed to hover, stretching out its presence just a touch beyond what felt comfortable. We remained silent about the events of the previous night. Yet it was in the gaze he cast upon me, unaware of my observance, that spoke volumes. After breakfast, Ryan finally made his way downstairs, his hair tousled and a yawn escaping his lips as if he had just emerged from a long slumber through the end of the world. He remained oblivious to the subtle changes in the atmosphere, the way I averted my eyes from Ethan, the way Ethan's responses were clipped whenever Ryan inquired about the completion of their group project that day. By midday, Ryan needed to dash out to rendezvous with a few classmates. "Are you all right with me leaving you two here?" he inquired of Ethan. "Sure," Ethan replied with a casual air. "I'll lend a hand to your mom with the cleanup before I take my leave." Ryan departed without a moment's hesitation. The echo of the front door shutting created a silence that lingered, more oppressive than the day prior. In a quest for purpose, I began collecting plates, seeking an activity to occupy my time. Ethan lingered at the sink, meticulously rinsing each item, one after the other. As I extended my hand to retrieve a dish from him, our fingers brushed together beneath the gentle cascade of water. Neither of us stirred. I raised my gaze. His gaze was fixed upon me. "It seems you didn't get much rest either, did you?" he inquired softly. I gently shook my head. "My thoughts are overwhelming." He turned off the water, his hand lingering nearby, radiating warmth that I could sense. "There's no need for pretense around me," he remarked. It was a straightforward sentence, yet it resonated like a key clicking into a lock I had kept sealed for far too long. My breath hitched, and in an instant I found myself retreating, not to escape him, but to prevent myself from crossing a line I couldn't uncross. Yet Ethan remained where he was, not taking a step forward. He took his time drying his hands, then remarked, "I suppose I should be on my way." I nodded, yet as he approached the door I found myself uttering, "Ethan." He paused, anticipating. "Thank you," I murmured, my voice gentler than I had meant it to be, in reflection of the previous evening, for maintaining unwavering focus. His expression transformed, caught in a delicate balance of affection and control. "You have no idea how difficult it is to refrain from doing so." And then he vanished. That ought to have marked the conclusion of the matter. However, later that week, when Ryan extended another invitation, it dawned on me that I wasn't the only one anticipating his arrival through that door. On the subsequent Friday, Ethan returned once more. Ryan had sent me a message indicating they would be engrossed in their project for the night, so I decided to order pizza and let them focus on their work upstairs. I reassured myself that my actions were merely a matter of courtesy, nothing beyond that. Yet, the reality was, he had occupied my thoughts throughout the entire week. Not all the time, at least that's what I reassured myself, but enough for me to perceive the change within. I would take a moment to smooth my hair before responding to the knock at the door. I often caught myself straining to hear the echo of his laughter filtering down from above. It was understated, yet unmistakable. The evening lingered endlessly. At 11, I caught the sound of Ryan's bedroom door creaking open, followed by the soft patter of footsteps descending the stairs. Ryan was the first to arrive, reaching for a soda from the fridge. "Ethan will be sticking around for a while, Mom," he remarked with a nonchalant air. "I'm off to Mark's for a few hours. We're gearing up for an all-nighter on the group draft." I nearly inquired about Ethan's absence from his side, but I held my tongue. "Very well. Travel carefully." With Ryan's departure, the house transformed once more. Its silence deepened, its space constricted, and an unsettling sense of peril lingered in the air. Ethan descended moments later, sleeves of his hoodie rolled up, hair a bit tousled. "Is Ryan really gone?" he inquired, although he was already aware. I nodded, making room on the kitchen counter. "Is there anything you desire? Shall we indulge in some coffee? Would you care for some tea?" "Just water," he remarked, casually leaning against the counter as if it were his rightful domain. I offered him a glass, our fingers grazing. Yet another of those fleeting moments that lingered just a bit too long. This moment we both held our gaze steady. Once more we found ourselves gathered around the kitchen table, engaging in idle chatter at the outset, discussing films, courses, and the state of the weather. Gradually the dialogue began to change. "You appeared changed this week," he remarked, observing me from behind the edge of his glass. I attempted to divert the conversation. The workload has been quite demanding. That's not it. His eyes held a firm resolve. It's me, right? The atmosphere surrounding us was heavy. Ethan, I cautioned, though my voice betrayed me, laced with a gentler note than I had meant to convey. He refrained from pushing further, simply reclining in his chair. Feel free to ask me to halt. Feel free to ask me to go. Yet, I won't feign ignorance. You've been on my mind. The rhythm of my heartbeat echoed in my ears. I lingered by the counter, feigning an effort to organize, yet my hands trembled uncontrollably. Suddenly, I sensed his presence looming. Behind me. Not making contact. Merely close enough to sense the warmth radiating from his chest against my back. You need not face the solitude of this kitchen each night, he whispered softly. I shut my eyes, caught in a struggle between retreating and surrendering to his embrace. Ethan, you are the closest companion of my son, I murmured. I understand, he replied. In this moment, I am simply a man yearning to embrace you. The words crept beneath my skin as if they were meant to reside there. I shifted just a fraction, and in that moment, his hand grasped my arm, tender yet unwavering. My breath caught in my throat, and for a fleeting moment, everything else faded away, leaving only the distance that separated us. I refrained from kissing him. He refrained from kissing me. The atmosphere crackled with intensity, a palpable tension that made it clear we had ventured into uncharted territory merely by being in such proximity. We separated as the unmistakable sound of a car echoed in the driveway. Ryan had arrived sooner than anticipated. Ethan recoiled immediately, his tone hushed. Another time, he remarked, then strolled into the living room as though the moment had never occurred. Yet I was aware, and he was too, that another time was bound to come. It wasn't long before another time arrived. 2 weeks later, Ryan found himself away for the weekend, immersed in a university trip. I promised myself that I would embrace the stillness to unwind, perhaps indulge in a film, or lose myself in a book. Yet as the clock approached 9 p.m., a sudden knock echoed through my door. I was aware even before I unsealed it. Ethan lingered in the shadows, clad in a black hoodie and jeans, his hands tucked away in his pockets, as raindrops danced upon his hair. I happened to be in the area, he remarked, as though that clarified anything at all. I ought to have refused him. I ought to have moved aside, allowing him no entry. Instead, I pushed the door open wider. We found ourselves in the kitchen. Naturally, that was where we would end up. The very room where it all began. I brewed tea, seeking a distraction for my hands, yet his gaze lingered on me throughout the entire process. You never mentioned that Ryan was gone, he finally said. I gulped. For the simple reason that you would have arrived. His lips formed a subtle arc. Is that really a negative aspect? I chose not to respond. I found myself unable to proceed, not with the frantic rhythm of my heartbeat echoing in my ears. He advanced with deliberate slowness, confidence radiating from him, until the space between us was reduced to a whisper of air. That night has been on my mind, he whispered. In this kitchen when you were here, and you allowed me to touch you. As I shut my eyes, Ethan, command me to go, he murmured, his voice dropping to a whisper. Indeed I shall. I ought to have. I did not. When his lips met mine, it was anything but hesitant. It marked the culmination of weeks filled with unvoiced tension, the resolution to every exchanged glance, every near contact. His hands radiated warmth as they caressed my face, then glided to my back, drawing me nearer. I found myself surrendering to him, each fragment of solitude I had been holding fading away in the warmth of his presence. We drifted toward the couch in the living room, yet we never quite arrived. It unfolded in the kitchen, beneath the soft glow of the light, with the rain gently drumming on the window pane. It was not tender, it was ravenous, urgent, a proximity that allowed no space for contemplation. In the aftermath, we lingered in quietude, our breaths gradually returning to normal. I ought to have been consumed by guilt, gripped by terror even. Instead, I felt acknowledged, seeking. Ethan gently swept a lock of hair away from my face. I have no regrets, he murmured softly. Yet I did, if only slightly, when my phone vibrated against the counter. Ryan had just sent a message, informing me that his trip had been unexpectedly shortened, and he would be returning home by tomorrow morning. The following day, Ethan departed prior to Ryan's arrival. We remained silent about the events that had transpired. Yet, just a week later, I spotted him once more. This time not within the confines of my kitchen, but rather across the street, approaching my home as if it were destined. And in that moment I understood, the true peril lay not in our actions. Neither of us wished to bring it to an end,